All right, start with a word of prayer. Lord, I pray that you be with us today. I pray that you be with me in the Sunday school class, Lord, and I pray that you be with everyone here listening. I pray that you would help me to speak your words properly, Lord, and teach your counsel and your word accurately to all the people here. I pray that you'd be with all the services and with Pastor as he preaches the messages this morning and tonight. Help us all to have open hearts to hear your word and to apply it to our lives. I pray this in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we're on week 10, but the seventh commandment. So this is the command on adultery. So this, as a warning, like I said last week, this is definitely a PG-13 class, a strong PG-13. It's not going to be any more explicit than you would just read from the pages of Scripture. So it is appropriate for a Sunday school class. Obviously, it's the Word of God, so it's in here. It's appropriate. But just as a second warning for all of you, I don't see too many kids, so it's fine. All right, so let's jump right into it. So this comes from Exodus 20, verses 14. Let's just read it. Thou shalt not commit adultery. That's all it says. Real simple, real easy. We're now in the stage of the commandments where everything's really short. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery. So it's getting easy. This command is very obviously, this covers adultery, like it says, which is the act of cheating on your spouse. But we're going to see that this covers much more than just adultery, including infidelity, which is adultery, fornication, incest, rape, LGBTQIP2SAA, which is the acronym, according to some people, and other forms of sexual immorality. So some of these will be pretty broadly covered and not too specific. We're also going to look at punishments for some of these sins, just like we did for murder. So murder had, coupled with it, a very specific punishment for very specific crimes. The same thing is going to happen here with adultery. So let's jump right into it. So the first aspect is infidelity, and we're going to also include fornication. So infidelity, what is that? The act of being sexually unfaithful in your marriage. So this is the clearest meaning of the commandment, and it sets up the proper intention and context for sexual intercourse, which is within marriage. So this definition necessarily requires us to have a proper understanding for marriage itself. So there's not much to elaborate on with the infidelity part. It's pretty obvious, it's pretty simple, and pretty clear cut. But to understand infidelity at all, we have to understand what marriage is. So marriage would be the union of one man to one woman for life. This is found several times in Scripture, but Matthew 19:4 through 9 is probably the best summary of this definition. So marriage it is the oldest of all human institutions, the oldest, which is very interesting. Before sin, there was marriage. So this is not something that was added later for the problems that we face as unsaved, lost, evil people. Marriage was not for that. It was a good thing. It was a good thing for us before we had sin. It was good for man to have a helpmeet before sin. It was not good for him to be alone. You can read this account in Genesis 2:18 through 25. I'm not going to read it for you, but it says in there that after God created man, he said it's not good for man to be alone, so he created a helpmeet for him. And this is all before sin. So this is clearly seen in Matthew 19:4 through 9. Let me read that to you. You can turn there if you want, but Matthew 19:4 through 9. And he answered and said unto them, Have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. They say unto him, Why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement, and to put her away? He saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, Whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whoso marrieth her which is put away, doth commit adultery. So this is a restatement of what the Jews should have understood from the beginning, that marriage was between one man and one woman permanently, forever. And the idea of divorce was not the intention from the beginning. So it's the oldest institution. Before sin, we had marriage, and it was a good thing. And today, marriage is also a legal and political institution, which is very important for understanding these commandments also. It is legal and political because the government is supposed to punish infidelity, which we'll get to later. In Matthew 19, we read that there's a passage, which we just read, where Jesus has to explain to the Jews of his day that marriage was always intended to be a permanent covenant, but because of their sinful hearts, there were exceptions given for specific sins. So let's turn to Deuteronomy 24, 1 through 2, and we're going to see that this is not quite the same thing that we would understand marriage to be, divorce to be today. Actually, could I have these lights on? I think they're the stage front. The other ones. There you go. Thank you. So Deuteronomy 24, 1 through 2 says this: When a man hath taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. And when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. So let's compare that with Deuteronomy 22, verses 13 through 21, which is in the same context, the same passage. Deuteronomy 22, 13 through 21 says, If a man take a wife, and go in unto her, and hate her, and give occasion of speech against her, and bring up an evil name unto her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I found her not a maid. Then shall the father of the damsel and her mother take and bring forth the tokens of the damsel's virginity unto the elders of the city of the gate. And the damsel's father shall say unto the elders, I gave my daughter unto this man to wife, and he hateth her. And lo, he hath given occasion of speech against her, saying, I found not thy daughter a maid. And yet these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity, and they shall spread the cloth before the elders of the city. And the elders of that city shall take the man and chastise him. And they shall immerse him in 100 shekels of silver, and give them unto the father of the damsel, because he hath brought up an evil name upon a virgin of Israel. And she shall be his wife. He may not put her away all his days. But if this thing be true, and the tokens of virginity be not found for the damsel, then they shall bring out the damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men and the men of her city shall stone her with stones, that she die, because she hath wrought folly in Israel to play the whore in her father's house. So shalt thou put evil away from among you. So this is interesting. This is often used as the purpose of divorce is for this reason. But if you take these two passages together, you kind of get the opposite conclusion. In this case, a divorce does require some form of uncleanness, and the Hebrew the Hebrew word for uncleanness in one of those verses, the Hebrew word for uncleanness there speaks of a sexual sin, a shameful, something that relates to shame and nakedness. So it's a sexual sin. It's some form that he discovers essentially on his wedding night. In Deuteronomy 24, the uncleanness had to occur before the marriage because he's finding out about it right at that point, which implies that the woman and possibly her family was lying to the prospective husband who only found out about the uncleanness after the wedding, which is very different than what we understand divorce to be today. We kind of understand divorce as just, oh, I didn't like her, and now I'll make up an excuse to get rid of her. No, that's not the case. There has to be uncleanness and proof of uncleanness right after the marriage, because obviously they weren't coming together before the marriage, because that would have been fornication, a different sin. So the idea here is that there is lying about her purity, and he's going into the marriage with false pretenses beforehand. If the divorce was in fact due to fornication by the woman's part, she's to be stoned. So not much of a divorce, is it? You just stone her right afterwards. This is from Deuteronomy 22. So if the husband lies about the reasons for the divorce, on the other hand, he is penalized financially, and now he is never allowed to divorce. So your divorce is now, you divorce and you stone the ex-wife, or you stay married forever. Does that sound like divorce in today's society? No, it doesn't. This is radically different from what we practice as divorce today. The divorced couple cannot, so there's another passage somewhere in Deuteronomy, I don't have time to go over it now, but there's a statement that says, I'm not going to bother with it. So anyway, marriage is also, so we cover that it's a political institution. The community is involved with punishing divorcement, with actually facilitating marriage. There are records and such that go on. It is an agreement. There is public, just like we have today in marriages. You come before people, before witnesses, you get married, you sign documents saying we are married, saying I witnessed the marriage and so forth. So it's a public thing. It is not some private institution. I guess if you are marooned on a deserted island with just you and one other woman, it could be a private institution. But in that case, there's no one else to deal with it. So even today, marriage is a public and political institution that will carry on to when we talk about government several weeks from now. So marriage is also pictured by Christ with the saints. So this fits very nicely into our moral framework, where God is our example for all things moral and good. He pictures marriage to us by his relationship with us. So this is both Old Testament and New Testament. Isaiah 50 verse 1 says, "Thus saith the Lord, where is the bill of your mother's divorcement, whom I have put away? Or which of my creditors is it to whom I have sold you? Behold, for your iniquities ye have sold yourselves, and for your transgressions is your mother put away." So the implication, this is a rhetorical question that God is asking Israel to try to rebuke them for the fact that they have moved away from him spiritually. He's saying, did I give you up? Did I divorce you? No. You have sold yourselves. You have committed fornication. You have committed iniquity with other people. It's not me who is unfaithful to you. It's you who are unfaithful to me. And he uses the parallel of him being the bride of, or the saints being the bride of Christ in this case. This is repeated in the New Testament in several places in Revelation, but 2 Corinthians 11:2 says, "For I am jealous over you with godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ." So this idea of the saints in the Old Testament, Israel, being God's betrothed, being his spouse, is repeated in the New Testament because we are grafted into the same deal, I guess. So that's a pretty simple understanding of marriage. For the 5 minutes we spent on it, it's a pretty bare bones look at it. It's much deeper. There are many other things involved in marriage, but for now, I think this serves as adequate to understand what marriage is supposed to be. So let's look at other types of adultery. So this is little nuances to adultery, polygamy. In the case that we understand adultery, it's usually that one spouse is cheating on another spouse. But in the idea of polygamy, it's one spouse, the man has multiple wives. And a lot of people would say it's not technically cheating because they're all in on it. It's the same thing with open marriages today. Both of these are sins, and pretty disgusting sins, as well as anything that is not specifically one man with one woman within marriage. The whole point of marriage is that is what contains all of our sexual satisfaction, all of our sexual acts belong within marriage. And anything that doesn't fit in the form of marriage is a sin. So it's not just the fact that I broke my vows to you and cheated with someone else. If you're in an open marriage or a polygamous marriage, your vows may in fact include other people, and just means that those vows are evil. Monogamy was obviously the intention from the beginning, and we read that in Matthew. Since God only created one man and one woman, he didn't create multiples of either of them. But there are some specific verses that teach us about this. In the New Testament, we looked at Matthew, but in Deuteronomy 17:17, the Bible prohibits kings from having multiple wives because they will turn away his heart from God, which is obviously something not limited to kings. There's nothing unique about kings that having multiple wives would turn their hearts away. So let me read Deuteronomy 17:17. It says, "Neither shall he," being the king, "multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away. Neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver and gold." And then in Matthew 19, Jesus repeats this and puts the emphasis on the permanence and the singleness of the union. 1 Corinthians 7:2 says, "Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband." So both husband and wife are singular, and they possess each other. It's a one man, one woman thing. Open marriages are just a special kind of evil. Just because the people involved agree to the polygamy or agree to the cheating doesn't make it moral. They have their own standards that they are trying to foist upon the idea of marriage, and it's an abomination. And we'll get to that a little bit later. All right, so that was adultery and the nuanced versions of adultery. So let's look at fornication, which is sex outside of a marriage, or a blanket term for sexual immorality. And so this does a lot of work for us. So the Bible, especially in the New Testament, I would say, uses the term fornication to refer to many types of sexual sins. But for now, we're only going to look at the fornication as it deals with a man and a woman who are not married, who are engaging with sex with each other outside of marriage. We'll look at the other forms later. But in 1 Corinthians 5:1, we read, "It is reported commonly that there is fornication among you, and such fornication as is not so much as named among the Gentiles, that one should have his father's wife." Okay, so this is interesting. So it uses the word fornication, which I've heard often stated that it's simply that fornication is just the very specific idea of one man who's not married, one woman who's not married, them having sex. It's much more broader than that, and this verse explains that pretty clearly. It's true in the Greek also that the idea is a much broader sinfulness with regard to sex, but right here is a very easy proof in English of that. So here we see that fornication applies to incest, since it was the man having his father's wife, which would be his mother, presumably. Let's see. That one should have his father's wife. So it's also incest, and it would be adultery because his father's wife is married, and yet it's called fornication. So it's a much broader idea than simply the sex outside of marriage. If neither of them are married, it's fornication. It's much broader than that. So there are other passages dealing with fornication, but the most inclusive and expansive one must be Matthew 5:27 through 28, where Jesus restates and clarifies the seventh commandment. He says, "Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart." So that doesn't quite sound like adultery, now does it? It's not that. He doesn't say either of them are married, so forth. The idea is the sin is broad. It is much more open, is much more expansive than simply the strict definition of adultery that we would understand today. So this is also interesting. This is Matthew 5. This is the Beatitudes. Just before this, he was talking about murder. He says, "Thou shalt not commit murder." And then he says, but if you hate someone, you've already committed murder in your heart. He's expanding on the 10 Commandments here. So very obviously he's referring to Exodus 20, verse 14, where he says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." And even in the broader context, he's saying all of these laws are more expansive than you understood them to be by your poor interpretation that the Jewish elders have foisted upon you. So Jesus is saying it's much more than the simple acts. It's much more than even what you physically do. Just the thought, just looking in your heart, just looking at someone and lusting after them in your heart is a sin in and of itself, and it breaks the commandment. So this definitely covers things like pornography and sinful thoughts, and it puts them in the same category as all the other sins. There are some... Somewhat famously, I guess it's kind of old at this point, but somewhat famously, Dennis Prager, who is a very well-known Jew, I don't know what sect of Jew or so forth he is, but he argued recently that just lust, if it's in your heart, and just those kinds of things that have no physical manifestation, those things are okay. It's just when you act upon it is when it becomes a sin. That sounds exactly like the Pharisees back in Jesus' day, and Jesus had to correct them then that, no, you don't understand the intent of the law from the beginning. It was not so. And it's very interesting that Jesus had to come down and spend all this time correcting them what they should have known all the way from the beginning. So it's good for us that Jesus clarified those things, and it's somewhat sad that the Jews today still need that correction. They never accepted Jesus. So the bottom line in all of this is that marriage is holy, good, and the only proper place for sex. So this comes from, you can read all those references on your own, Hebrews 13:4, Proverbs 5:18, Proverbs 18:22, 19:14, and etc. God created marriage and its related blessings and privileges to fulfill our good and natural human needs and desires. He tells us in Hebrews 13:4 that marriage is honorable in all and the bed undefiled, but whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. So God has clearly given us his perfect plan. Sex within marriage is good and moral, but any sex outside of that is sin. All right, so continuing on, let's look at rape and incest. Now these are special cases, so obviously we pretty much prove that all forms of sexual immorality, all forms of sex outside of marriage is condemned, but let's look at these ones in particular. So rape, this comes from Webster's 1828, and it's a nice PG rated definition: the carnal knowledge of a person forcibly and against their will. So very nicely worded there. So outside of rape, consent is not a biblical or moral standard when it comes to sex. So this is a very interesting point, and this is where fundamentally Christian understanding of sex differs from pretty much everyone else's understanding of sex. Everywhere in all of society, anywhere, rape is condemned, but the reason why it is important. Up until this point, there has been no discussion in the Bible with regards to sex about consent. In fact, outside of literal rape, God does not seem to care about whether or not you agreed to any specific sexual perversion. So in the idea of open marriages, everyone's in agreement. It's not technically rape because everyone agrees to it. In the world's view, because they have a very utilitarian view of whatever makes the most people happy must be good, their view is, well, they're all happy, so what's wrong with it? The Bible has a very different view of sex and morality, obviously. And so biblically, God only deals with consent in two places that I could find with regards to sex. First is when dealing with rape, as we'll look at soon, and the other one is when it deals with sex within marriage. So this is 1 Corinthians 7, 3-5 says, "Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. The wife hath not power over her own body, but the husband, and likewise also the husband hath not power over his own body, but the wife. Defraud ye not one the other, except it be with consent for a time, that ye may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency." So in this passage, we learn that within a marriage, we are not allowed to withhold our consent from our spouse, except by mutual agreement, and even then, only for a short period of time. So this indicates that at least one purpose of marriage is for the proper use of sex. And it is a good thing. And like the Bible says, it is the bed is honorable and undefiled. And it is the purpose of marriage to allow for that special act, that special blessing. And this is the only place I could find outside of rape throughout the whole Bible that deals with consent-based sex, which is the #1 rule for all the rest of the world. Everyone, everywhere in the world, has a hard time explaining why homosexuality is wrong as long as people consent to it. In fact, I challenge any of you to come up with a good argument against homosexuality that doesn't involve biblical principles. In fact, that doesn't involve explicitly biblical principles. I've heard a lot of arguments that say, well, marriage is intended to be for children, but why? Marriage is intended to create more people. Why? Why is that the case? Why couldn't homosexuals just adopt the extra number of kids in foster homes and such? I honestly don't see a good secular argument against homosexuality if I'm only using utilitarian ideas. It's very hard to make one. But the Bible doesn't have a utilitarian worldview. It has a biblical moral worldview where God creates certain things for certain reasons, and we should follow those. So this is where we get a lot of tricky problems. This is the root, in fact, of all sexual sins throughout, at least that I could understand, throughout the Western world. we have changed from a marriage-based view on sex to a consent-based view on sex. And that is the root of all the sexual perversions that we see today. So going back to rape, what is rape? Rape involves force and resistance. So this is interesting. Turn to Deuteronomy 22. You should be close there anyway. Deuteronomy 22, 23 through 27 says, "If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto an husband, and a man find her in the city and lie with her, then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die. The damsel, because she crieth not, being in the city, and the man, because he hath humbled his neighbor's wife. So shalt thou put away evil from among you. But if a man find a betrothed damsel in the field, and the man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her shall die. But unto the damsel thou shalt do nothing. There is in the damsel no sin worthy of death. For as when a man riseth against his neighbor and slayeth him, even so is this matter. For he found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried, and there was none to save her." So this is interesting. There's a lot in this passage. First, I want to say the interesting part of where it says, "So shalt thou put away evil from among you." It's again this public idea of public sin corrupts the entire society. Remember when we looked at murder, we saw that capital punishment had the idea of cleansing the public from an individual's sin. It's the same thing here. It's an interesting study that I think we'll go through it at the end of all these classes. But it's very interesting. So there's two situations here. It's the expectation, so if we read this carefully, it's the expectation that the woman who is being victimized will shout and resist if she's being raped. Hence the different responses depending on if she's in a city versus in the wilderness in a remote location. If she's in a city and she is not heard, it is not considered rape because she did not resist. Now the idea here is that there's no windows back in the olden days. If you're in a city, everyone knows when anyone shouts. If you put up even just a little bit of a fight and you shout, someone's going to hear you, someone's going to know to help you. That's the idea. If it is rape, there must be resistance. There also needs to be some form of evidence of resistance, in other words. So it's not specifically that you have to shout or shout a certain thing, or you have to be within the borders of the city here. Oh, I was 2 feet this way versus 2 feet that way, and I was outside of the city limits. No, the idea is you must resist, and there must be some evidence of resistance. You cannot just accuse someone of rape years or decades later and expect to be believed. You have to, in the moment, resist them. This obviously is to help avoid false rape accusations. And a lot of times, if we read later, we're going to find that the punishment for fornication is death. So what's to stop the woman if it's found that they were fornicating? What's to stop the woman from saying, "Oh, he was raping me," and then only he dies? So this is to stop false rape accusations. This has the same idea of you're going to court. You need to prove with evidence that you resisted the rape. Conversely, if she's in a place where there is no resisting, you could resist all day long and there's no one there to help you. You're in the wilderness. In that case, only the man is to be put to death. So if you're in the city and you resist, you're going to be saved, theoretically. If you're in the wilderness and you resist, doesn't matter. It's still going to happen, and he is to be put to death. So it's obviously it's a situational thing. It's the idea is you're going to go to court to prove all this, which is routinely true in the Old Testament. We see lots of examples, not specifically here, but we see lots of examples when one person has a thing against another, they go to court, they go to the elders, they go to the priests even, and they work out the details there. But in this case, rape is always punishable by death because it is considered morally the same as murder from verse 26. So this is not a light thing. This is not something that we should punish with 2 years in prison and a slap on the wrist and you get put on a registry. No, you are to be killed. You are to be, in fact, publicly killed. This is fundamentally evil. It is exceedingly evil. It's considered the same as murder. It's as if you had murdered that woman by raping her. And the way we punish rape today is just absolutely detestable. It needs to be just like for murder, we need to have the capital punishment for this. And part of the reason is because it puts away evil from the people, from the land. So let's move on to incest. So this is sex between members of close family. So this is also forbidden for a few reasons, but I think most notably it is because of the danger of birth defects. So the idea is you are going to harm your children by engaging in incest. So where do I get this idea from the Bible? Obviously, birth defects as a phrase is never found in the Bible, but Leviticus 20:19 through 21 says, "And thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of thy mother's sister, nor of thy father's sister, for he uncovereth his near kin. They shall bear their iniquity. And if a man shall lie with his uncle's wife, he hath uncovered his uncle's nakedness. That they shall bear their sin, they shall die childless. And if a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing. He hath uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall die. They shall be childless." So the punishment for this is the revealing part of this sexual sin. So obviously, we read a case in the New Testament that someone was having adultery and it was incest, and that was forbidden. But the punishment here is specific, and it's interesting. The fact that they should die childless is not found in any other punishment for any other sexual sin. Because in those cases, there's either no possibility of children, like in homosexual relations, or there is no immediate harm to any potential children. So obviously sex fundamentally has involved with it the creation of children. In most other cases, if it's not incest, there's no specific danger that the child will have any harm from your sin. But in this case, it does. And I think it's pretty interesting that it's here in Leviticus that we see the first instance of a forbidding of that. Now, we don't see any examples of it occurring before then, but we do see examples of cousins or first cousins, second cousins, I can't remember which, of people marrying in that case. Like I believe Isaac was second cousins to his wife. And that was okay. In fact, today even second cousin is generally considered safe. But here in Leviticus, we're given this prescription where we're given a, you can't be with your uncle's wife and other near kin. So why is that here? Why uncle? Why specific near kin? And why is this new in the Bible? So obviously before the fall in the Garden of Eden, man was perfect. And when Adam and Eve had children, who did the children marry? Their siblings. It was what we would consider incest. And why was that okay then? In fact, it was the only thing possible then. Why was that okay and not now? It's because of the harm to the children. Genetic defects, birth defects, require many, many generations of mutations, many, many generations of corruption of the DNA, and those generations have to add up in their corruption before any real defects will express themselves. And in fact, the idea is that anyone within a family line has similar defects to their near kin. And so their marriage will multiply those effects. And that is why incest is wrong, because you are giving a high likelihood of, or a higher at least likelihood of birth defects. And you do see that in any situation where there is incest and inbreeding. Famously, the royal lines of all of Europe were inbreeding a lot, and they had some pretty nasty defects quite often. There's all the jokes about Alabama and West Virginia and so forth. But that is the reason. It's for the birth defects. It's for the harm it does to the children. You are not permitted to marry your near kin. All right, so let's get into the real interesting ones. LGBTQ, QIP, 2S, AA, and other sins. So what on earth is this? So this is what it is. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, pansexual, two-spirit, which is the 2S there, androgynous, and asexual. So this is only one version of these acronyms. Usually we just say LGBTQ or LGBTQ+. But I think it's helpful to know the full acronym so that we can emphasize the delusional nature of these things. So let's try to deal with some of these pretty briefly. Let's look at homosexuality. So homosexuality, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and pansexual. Pansexual, by the way, means you be with anyone. You're not picky, which is weird. So this is all forbidden. So this is from Leviticus 18:22, Leviticus 20:13, Deuteronomy 23:17, 1 Kings 14:24, 1 Corinthians 6:9, Romans 1:27, and Matthew 19:4-5, all explicitly forbid homosexual marriage of any kind. It's very obvious in the Bible. Anyone trying to make any case against this is willfully ignorant and probably reprobate. They're probably just trying to excuse their sins by claiming that God is okay with it, which is awful. Let's look at transgender and two-spirit. So technically, these are not necessarily sexual sins so much as they are deeper denials of your physical and spiritual nature. So we're not going to really cover them, other than to say they are ridiculous, they are forbidden. Two-spirit, by the way, is the idea that you are two people buried in the same body, or that you have a spirit, essentially the spirit animal, you have a spiritual twin, maybe. It's a strange situation. It's just delusion. It's not even a mental illness, like they say. It's just evil. They are steeped in evil, and they cannot see out of it. Here's another interesting one, though. Being effeminate is also a sin, and it's lumped in with homosexuality and fornication. So 1 Corinthians 6:9 says, "Know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves will mankind." It goes on to say, essentially, will not inherit the kingdom of God. So here's an interesting one. Effeminate. What does that mean? It means you are not manly. You are, maybe we would say today, womanish. You are acting like a woman. You are blurring the distinction between man and woman, and you're doing it purposefully. That's effeminate. If you look at any form of LGBTQ, especially the trans, obviously the trans, but if you look at any form of LGBTQ people, especially the guys, you will notice very obviously they look extremely effeminate. It's a knock-on sin to all these other sexual perversions. If you look at gay couples, one will be masculine and one will be feminine. They're effeminate. It's interesting if you look at lesbians, one generally tends to be female, womanly, and one tends to be more masculine. They are essentially affirming the obvious truth of marriage, but they can't quite understand it. They can't quite square the circle, so they just fill those roles by themselves naturally. And God says that is a sin in and of itself. You must embrace your own person, embrace what you are, that God created you to be, and fulfill those roles. And to do otherwise is a sin. So transgenderism would be the maximum form of effeminate if you want to look at it that way. So also obviously a sin. Asexual means you're not attracted to either men or women, and is strictly speaking not a sin. It's not a sin to be not attracted to anyone. However, you're probably never going to meet someone who is asexual and also spiritually healthy. That's just probably not going to happen. It's not that it can't, but good luck finding one, especially nowadays. So in general, most of these identities are either the result of or directly lead to the breaking of marriage and are therefore sinful. As long as if you keep the correct view of marriage in mind, all these other things will very naturally to you seem like a sin. And that's obviously because they are. Perhaps the most sinister part of the LGBTQ plus identities or agenda is the plus. So obviously I read the whole acronym, or one version of the acronym to you. They generally just put a plus in there, not just because they're somewhat ashamed of their other versions, but because there's more in there than they really want to lead into. So specifically pedophilia. So here's the meme. We need to support LGBTQIA+. And the question is, well, what does the plus stand for? And then you see over here, oh, you can't really see it, but there's a little bear there who somehow to internet people represents pedophilia. So the idea is that we put a plus there so that we can bring in anything else that we want to. Even if we are somewhat ashamed of it ourselves, will allow for it, since we cannot, by our morality of consent, we cannot categorically say it's wrong. So they will just put a plus there to say, we'll just bring in everything. And it's a very sinister movement that has other sins like pedophilia, incest, bestiality, pornography, and prostitution. All these things are, you will see more and more evidence of them making these mainstream and bringing them in to mainstream society in order to say, because that's their identity, that's who they are, it makes them happy, who are you to say no? So obviously these are all wrong. Matthew 18:6 speaks about, but whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and that he were drowned in the depths of the sea. So this passage is not strictly speaking about pedophilia, but the principle is that any harm done to a child is punished much more severely than it would otherwise be if it involved adults. So I think taking this principle and applying it to sexual sins, whatever you're going to do to an adult, it should be worse if you do it to a child. All right, so then last week I asked you this question. Which one more closely represents the proper response to sexual immorality? What the Muslims do in the Middle East, where they throw people off buildings if they're gay and then stone them, or just being cool with it as all of Western society seems to be now? So how many of you are brave enough to say A? How many of you are brave enough to say B? Okay, so let's look at the last part of this aspect, the punishments for this sin. So not all of the sins that we have covered have specific punishments laid out for them, since some of them are ridiculous, like pansexual and non-binary. These are just people making things up, honestly. These are just ridiculous inventions of bored perverts in the 21st century. But most of these sinful actions do have punishments specifically laid out for them. So adultery has the death penalty. Here's the references. Rape has the death penalty. We read that. Pedophilia has the death penalty. Incest has the death penalty. Homosexuality has the death penalty. Bestiality has the death penalty. Prostitution has the death penalty. Fornication, forced marriage. Oh, that's an interesting one. I actually think this is one of the best ones. So I don't know if you can even read that. Some of you have this printed out. You can probably read it. But adultery, death. Rape, death. Incest, death. Homosexuality, bestiality, prostitution, death. Fornication, believe it or not, forced marriage. So I think this is very interesting, this last one, because it has a remedy. Your sin has a way to, it's never not a sin, but it has a way to make up for it. If you are two unmarried people and you have sex, you are essentially playing at marriage. You are doing what you would be doing if you were married. The remedy is you must marry. In modern terms, we would call this a shotgun wedding. If you're fooling around with someone and the dad finds out, you're now getting married. And this is biblical, and this is good, and this is it's somewhat of a mercy. It's not just that you don't just kill them in all cases. If there's a way that you can salvage the situation, you do so. Obviously, one thing that is not, that at least I didn't discuss too much when dealing with these sins, is the potential creation of a baby, which will be robbed of a proper family structure if these sins are committed. Always in the Bible is that idea kind of underlies the whole thing. And it was obvious for incest, but it's true for all other sins. If you are involved in sex in some way, there is always that chance for a baby. And this is partially why it's taken so seriously, all of these sins, because you are harming the child by simply not having a cohesive family structure. And anyone who's been through a divorce can tell you that. So I hope this answers that question from last week. So very quickly wrapping up, what do we learn from our moral framework? The law is a teacher. What does it teach us about God? God is faithful to us. So marriage is paralleled spiritually with God and us, the saints, in the New Testament and the Old Testament. God is faithful to us. God is pure in all things in his relationship with us in this case. God is long-suffering since he has not divorced us in this case. But God is not tolerant of sin. And that should be obvious from all these punishments. What does this teach us about us? our faithfulness is not guaranteed. So both our faithfulness to each other in marriage and in other ways, and also to God spiritually, is never guaranteed. And in fact, we must always be vigilant that we keep our faithfulness in mind, in the forefront of our minds. We are biologically prone to sin. This is often harped upon when the idea of homosexuality is brought up, but I feel it naturally. I'm just naturally attracted to the same sex. That may be true. Don't dismiss that. That could be definitely true. Are we not biologically driven to all forms of sin, all sorts of things? If I see money, I just want it. That's natural in our inherent being. But that doesn't excuse us to steal the money. Why would that for this sin? Just the fact that you do want to do a sin is not evidence that the sin is good. But that is exactly how it's argued throughout, even in Christian circles today. What does it teach about good and evil? The context of an action can determine its morality. So the act of sex is neither good nor bad. It's just, when does it happen? Is it within marriage? Yes, it's good. Is it outside of marriage? No, it's bad. There is something apparently very important about that context where a thing occurs that makes it either permissible or impermissible. And that's true about some sins. And sins also have permanent repercussions. So obviously, the birth of a child out of wedlock, totally permanent. Ruined lives and marriages, those are permanent. Sin has serious implications that you sometimes cannot overcome. You can only do your best to live with them. All right, so how do we do this? So if we do this, what do we get for outcomes? Sexual purity in all things, which is very good. Strong marriages, and in fact, we get marriage itself from this whole commandment. The sanctity of marriage is kept intact. And how do we do it? First, get married. That's the ideal anyway. It's not necessarily required, but it is definitely the norm and is definitely the ideal. And when you are married, do not cheat on your spouse. Do not have sex outside of marriage in any case, before or after the marriage. Guard your eyes and your mind, and do not put yourself in compromising situations. So you can get that from lots of places in the Old Testament, especially Joseph. When Potiphar's wife tried to come after him, he just fled. So don't put yourself in compromising situations. We have no time to develop that, unfortunately. So that's it. No questions for next week. But if you do have questions of this week, you can ask after class. So you are dismissed.